Good morning. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, Jan.
And good morning to all of you. I'm saying morning because it's morning for us, but because of the magic of the internet, people are joining us from around the world. So in addition to people from the United States, there are people here from Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, Mexico, and Norway. And some of you are going to be watching later because you couldn't come on Saturday morning. So whatever time of day it is, I hope it's a good one. For the people in the United Kingdom, it's 6 o'clock at night. And I know Allison is watching from the United Kingdom and another Allison from Norway. My name is Jan Adrian, and I'm the founder and director of Healing Journeys. For 25 years, Healing Journeys produced the conference Cancer as a Turning Point from Surviving to Thriving. Many of you attended that conference in different parts of the country. And thank you very much for joining us this morning or for listening to this for the launch of my memoir, Coloring Outside the Lines, Surviving and Thriving with Cancer for 30 plus years. I also want to send my gratitude out for those of you that made donations when you registered for this. We appreciate it very much to help cover the expenses of the webinar. And I've invited Terry Tate to help me with this because Terry was so much a part of the beginning of the memoir when I didn't know I was writing a memoir. Many of you know Terry because she was a speaker at many of the Healing Journeys conferences. And for those of you that don't know her, Terry is a survivor of oral cancer, for which she was given a 2% chance of surviving. And you can read her inspiring story in her cancer memoir, which is called A Crooked Smile and was published by Sounds True. I also, this may seem weird, but I also want to introduce my sauna, because I've been told that people are trying to figure out what is it that you're looking at behind me. And I'm gonna open the door. This is my sauna, and what you're looking at is the glass door reflecting what I'm looking at out the window, which is right in front of me. So you're not looking out the window, but you're looking at the reflection. So Terry and I are going to have a conversation for maybe 45 minutes approximately. And after our conversation, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if you have questions while we're talking, please put them in the Q&A. And Sandra Marinella is going to be monitoring the Q&A. And when we give her the cue, she will read those questions to us. So if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A. So welcome, Terry, and thank you for joining me for this celebratory occasion.
Thank you for inviting me, Jan. I could not be any more thrilled to be here. And now we've confirmed what I've always known, that you are an international superstar. Your word is carried far and wide. And it's really just such a privilege. Jan and I have known each other for what seems like a very long time. And I am in total awe of you. I think you're one amazing human and am just thrilled to know you. And we have a great deal in common and are both sort of intuitive weirdos, but also have a lot that's very, very different. And still, we get along beautifully, and I am so proud of you and so honored to have been asked to write the foreword to your book, and so very grateful that this has come to fruition. And we'll talk more about how we've connected around this book, but I will start out by reading the foreword, if that's
Okay.
okay with you. All right.
Great.
Coloring outside the lines. I'm not even sure I want to write a memoir. Jan and I are sitting on my beige leather living room couch. She is in town to participate in my first ever memoir writing class, which will be held in this very room the very next day. But you have such an amazing story to tell. Think of all the people you can help. I had told Jan's story countless times in the 20 plus years I had known her. Everyone who heard it was inspired beyond measure. Not only because she had been living with cancer for over 30 years, but because hers is a meaningful, vibrant life, and she has encouraged thousands of people. Well, if I did write one, I know what I'd call it, she said. What's that? Coloring outside the lines. She went on to tell me the story that she is about to read to you. And I've been coloring outside the lines ever since. You'll hear that story in just a minute. We're building suspense here. 3 years later, almost to the day, Jan called to ask if I would write the foreword to this book. It had taken me nearly 20 years to write my memoir, so I had to get by my jealousy. But this was Jan. When she sets her mind to something, you don't want to be in her way, even if you are cancer. When Jan was first diagnosed with breast cancer in 1989, she found the standard medical approach wanting when it came to her emotional, spiritual, and nutritional needs. Never one to sit around and whine about a problem, Jan set out to solve it. She created Cancer as a Turning Point conferences to fill this gap, and has helped 25,000 people in 37 gatherings ever since then. I had the honor to speak at an early conference and became part of the Healing Journeys family. Cancer patients and their loved ones received an exquisite blend of inspiration, education, and support. Jan ran these amazing events with military precision and an open heart. Jan has cohabitated with cancer for 3 decades and has lived a full, fun, and meaningful life. You are lucky to get to read about it. In these pages, you will find the inspiration to create that kind of life for yourself. Regardless of the kind of challenges you may face, Jan's story will support you whenever you too want to color outside the lines.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for your support. Thank you for reading it. So, because of that title, I want to just read part of that story from the book. It's actually the first chapter, and I'm not reading the whole thing because not reading the whole chapter, but I'm reading part of it. So I was 3 years old when Aunt Ruby locked me in a dark closet for hours for coloring outside the lines in my coloring book. Aunt Ruby was my mother's sister, older by 18 months. My mother was the first of 5 sisters to get married, and I was the first grandchild. Ruby wasn't yet married and took her jealousy of my mother out on me. My mother had rheumatic fever as a child. This resulted in her having an enlarged heart and being limited in what she could do as an adult. She couldn't walk up a flight of stairs without resting several times. She couldn't drive, and she never worked outside of the home. My mother was told she'd die if she went into labor. I was a diaphragm baby taken out by planned cesarean section before labor could happen. My mother's tubes were tied so she couldn't get pregnant again. I was named Janice, which I was told meant the grace of God. My parents believed I was a miracle sent from God to help take care of my sickly mother. From the beginning, I was told that if I upset my mother, she could die. If I spoke too loudly or had a temper tantrum, I could kill my mother. I learned to be very quiet and to be helpful as I could be. I learned not to impose myself on others. When I was 3 years old and my mother was in the hospital, I stayed with Aunt Ruby. I wasn't happy with this living situation and was afraid it would be permanent if my mother died. It was during the summer, and Ruby was living in a large old Victorian house that was a college dorm during the school year. We were the only two people rattling around in this cavernous building. When I was allowed to visit my mom in the Catholic hospital, I was even more afraid for my mother's life. In her hospital room, I met two of the nuns that were caring for her. They were in full habit with only their faces peeking out. I had never seen such strange creatures before. They seemed other than human, and I didn't know what they were doing to my mother. I was afraid and didn't have many acceptable ways of expressing that fear. When we got back to Ruby's living quarters after this visit, I used my coloring book to express my fears. I scribbled boldly inside and outside the lines. In Ruby's view, this was the behavior of a naughty girl who deserved punishment. Several hours locked in a pitch black closet seemed appropriate to her. Although I was terrified in that dark closet, I'm now grateful for the powerful early lesson I received, that I can comfort myself. This was one of my first experiences of creating an inner sense of calm in spite of what was happening in the world around me. I'm not at the mercy of the outside world to determine how I feel. Learning that how I feel is an inside job was empowering and has guided me through many situations that could have been even more stressful.
Wow. That's just so amazing. And it's true, you are very self-contained in certain way. I mean, just in the way you deal with everything. And your calmness is always such a gift to the people around you. But so you had a title and you had a story, but you still weren't sure that you wanted to write a book. Why was that?
Actually, that story, I told that story in your storytelling class
Right.
before I started the memoir class. And I wasn't thinking of writing a book, and for several reasons. People had told me for years that I should write a book. But for one, there were so many cancer books on the market, cancer memoirs. I thought I didn't want to add to that glut of books. I also thought I couldn't write a book. I couldn't be inspirational because I wasn't cancer-free. And I thought I wasn't a good writer. So lots of reasons not to write a book.
So what changed your mind other than my constant hounding?
So enough people told me that my story was inspirational, even though I wasn't cancer-free. Just the fact that I had lived with cancer for 30 plus years. And And they said they had not seen such a book on the market. The cancer memoirs on the market were usually how they healed. And it was, they had not seen a book that was like mine. And then I met Sandra Marinella, and she is the author. I'm going to show you the book. She's the author of The Story You Need to Tell, Writing to Heal from Trauma, Illness, or Loss. And Sandra and I started doing book groups, reading her book on Zoom. And one of the exercises in her book, called Stepping Stones, asks us to write down what were the meaningful or life-changing or just what events in our life had made a difference. And it said to write 7 to 10 of them. And I started writing, just making a list. And I came up with, I think, 25 with my first list. And then COVID happened. Well, this was right after COVID had happened that Sandra and I were doing this class on Zoom. And then Terry, you had your first memoir writing class. And we met on Zoom for 2 years, twice a month. And in every one of those meetings, I would just write the story of one of the things on that list. And I was doing it for myself. I mean, I was really looking at my life and learning from it. And then gradually it turned into a book.
What do you know? That's so great. Yes, it was such a privilege to have you in that first ever memoir class. And you were always saying, "Oh, I'm not as good a writer as so and so," and yet you made it through.
And it's true. There were 2 people in that class who were really good writers. And when I say I'm not a writer, it means I'm not the best writer in the room. And I'm not. Both John and Meridian are better writers than I am.
Well, and what I love about those groups is that doesn't matter. And you got a lot of support. And here it is. So you want to share the introduction with us?
I do. And I have to say too, my son, Brian, is a published writer, and he teaches writing at the graduate level. He teaches creative writing. And so when I had enough stories written that I thought, oh, this might be a book, I sent them to Brian, and he asked me so many good questions about what's the message, who's your audience, what's the purpose of this. And so much of what I wrote in the introduction came as a result of Brian's questions. My throat is getting scratchy.
Understand.
So the name of the introduction is Both and. This is a cancer memoir, but it's not a story of how I became cancer-free, because I didn't. My first cancer diagnosis was in 1989. I've had 3 primary cancers: breast cancer in both breasts and ocular melanoma, and more recurrences than I can count. I've had breast cancer metastasize to my lungs since 2011. Essentially, cancer has been a chronic illness for me for over 30 years. My story is about living and thriving with cancer. Most people see cancer as a death sentence, and the primary reaction is fear. Once they receive a diagnosis, they want to eradicate every cancer cell from their body, and they live in constant fear of a recurrence. Their focus is on fighting the cancer, attacking the tumor, trying to kill the intruder. There is another way to address cancer that may involve more curiosity than fear. We all have cancer cells in our bodies at some time. Our immune systems are meant to eliminate them. We don't need to get rid of every cancer cell to live a happy, full life, but we do need to keep cancer from progressing. My focus has been on creating a terrain in the body that isn't conducive to the growth of cancer and that also stimulates the self-healing mechanism of the body as it was designed. These two methods of dealing with cancer don't pose an either or question. It's both and. There is both fear and curiosity, and there is both fighting the tumor and supporting the self-healing ability of the body. I was devastated when I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1989 at age 47. My life up to that point had taught me to be curious, intuitive, to trust divine guidance, and to color outside the lines. Most of the stories in this book are about specific events in my life that helped to form or strengthen the attitudes, beliefs, and lifestyle that have been major resources in supporting me through more than 30 years of thriving with cancer. Something I've done to manage my cancers has made a difference, but I can't be sure what. Even if I knew, I couldn't tell you what would make a difference for you. This isn't a how-to book. We're unique individuals and we each need to figure out what's best for us. My wish is that hearing my story will create hope and other options for the millions of people who think cancer, especially a recurrence, is a death sentence. My hope is that those who hear my story will be curious and discover in its pages something that might be of assistance in learning to thrive with whatever has washed up on your beach.
Oh, that's beautiful. And, I heard something there that I'm sure you've said in my presence millions of times, and somehow it just hit me. The notion that you don't need to get rid of every cancer cell. If you stop and think about the business that's drawn up around the belief that you do, and I know myself, I've spent years, months of my life waiting for biopsy results that were all predicated on the notion that if there was one cell there, I was doomed, and if there weren't, I was okay. I mean, that's such something we just don't question.
Mhm.
So that's just worth reading the book just for that line. And I've heard you say it before, so that just hit me. But you acknowledge that you're upset, when you get a diagnosis, and yet you're also curious. And I sort of skip curiosity and go straight to freaked out. And that's sort of where I live, is in freaked out and in the, what's it going to be, and holding my breath until somebody says, no, there's no cancer there. I really got when you were reading your story this morning about what you learned in that closet, that was part of what's allowed you to rely on your intuition and have this kind of calm. But what else has contributed to that, do you think?
I've had experiences in my life. I mean, I was asking that question of myself because that's a question so many cancer patients that I've counseled have asked me. And I had an experience when I was 16 that really informed how I deal with life and especially how I deal with cancer. And when I was 16, I was running a fever. I was sick. I missed an entire semester of school. I was home schooled because I was tired all the time and running a fever. And my parents took me to several medical doctors and they could not name what was wrong with me. They couldn't diagnose it. It was at a time when mononucleosis was really trendy, I would say. And they tested me for that, and I didn't have that. So when they couldn't name the illness, they couldn't treat it. And my parents, in desperation, took me to a chiropractor. And in the book, I won't go into it now, but in the book, I write about why chiropractors were, why my parents could trust taking me to a chiropractor. But they took me to Dr. Friesen. And I want to read just part of that story in the book too.
Okay.
So I felt like I was missing out on life and was desperate to be healthy again. And it seemed like my best option at the time was to follow Dr. Friesen's advice that with years of hindsight has held up well. Dr. Friesen said, we didn't need to name my illness. Obviously something was wrong, but our bodies are meant to heal themselves. We needed to give my body the nutrients it needed for self-healing. He rubbed minerals into my body and gave me some Chinese herbs to make a foul-tasting tea, and he used a pendulum to determine what I should and shouldn't eat to strengthen my immune system. His dietary recommendations were challenging for a 16-year-old, but my motivation was strong enough to persevere. I couldn't eat anything white, including sugar and white flour. No birthday cake, Twinkies, or Wonder Bread, all of which I loved. That's an indication of how bad my diet was before Dr. Friesen's intervention. There were also some recommendations of what to eat in addition of what I should avoid. And this is going to be shocking. He instructed me to eat lots of red meat, to have some vinegar and nutmeg every day, and gave me a list of vegetables that were healthiest for me. After 6 months on this white-free diet, I was healthier than I had ever been. My temperature was normal and I was no longer fatigued all the time. Prior to that, I used to have the flu every winter and had even had pneumonia. Following my diet change, I didn't have the flu for at least 20 years. My straight hair that my mom curled with home permanents every year was suddenly naturally curly. Life didn't just get back to normal, it got better than anything I'd ever known. This experience had a profound and lasting impact on me. I learned there is another way of approaching illness that doesn't depend on the pharmaceutical industry. This was my first exposure to the age-old controversy of the germ theory versus the terrain theory. The germ theory argues that germs are what we need to worry about, and we need to keep finding ways to kill them off. The medical doctor I saw at 16 needed to know what germ was attacking me before he could treat me. The terrain theory argues that if the body is well and balanced, the germs that are a natural part of life and the environment will be dealt with by the body. When an illness occurs, the body needs to be balanced and/or fortified so it can deal effectively with the germs. This is not a new idea, but I hadn't been so personally and intimately introduced to it before. This experience stimulated my belief in the terrain theory. We never named what was making me sick, yet by fortifying my immune system, my symptoms were eliminated. This gave me a strong belief in the self-healing ability of my body. This experience was a profound lesson for me that what we eat matters. For the self-healing mechanism to be effective, the body needs appropriate fuel. When I was diagnosed with cancer many years later, the first recommendation from a doctor was to depend on the pharmaceutical industry to attack the cancer. In this case, the treatment was called chemotherapy. Of course, there is no germ that we know of that causes cancer, but the principle is the same. Attacking the cancer is similar to attacking a germ, but this ignores the terrain and the self-healing ability of the body. It destroys the very immune system that I depended on for my body to eliminate the cancer. My earlier lessons were so strong that I couldn't follow the doctor's recommendation. I did one infusion of chemotherapy out of fear and quit when I experienced the destruction it was doing to my immune system. What felt like a tragedy when I was 16 now feels like one of the most profound experiences of my life.
Wow. That's all just so remarkable. And what I'm also in awe of is your ability continuously to do everything possible. And that, I mean, it's another way in which we're so different. I mean, my idea of a healthy diet is cutting back to one bowl of ice cream. And so I'm so in awe of what you do. But I must say, over the years, you have influenced me. So I'm doing a lot better, and I owe it all to you. But
in the chapter, I do in the book have chapters on various strategies that I used, and I have a whole chapter on nutrition. And I think one of the most important things is that everybody is different. So when I study nutrition, some people say you have to be on a paleo diet. Some say you have to be on a vegan diet.
right.
And I don't think the same diet is good for everybody. I think we are very unique. And
Yeah.
you and I are great examples of that.
We are. We are, absolutely, yes. There are so many differences, and yet there are similarities, for sure.
So I have said sometimes that one of the gifts in cancer is that it has really helped me trust my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Because how do you know what diet is best for you, and how do you know what to eat? And I said that Dr. Friesen, when I was 16, used a pendulum.
Right.
That was the first time I ever experienced a pendulum. And then for many years after that, I wished that I could find another practitioner who could use a pendulum because it seemed so effective. And I tried doing a pendulum myself. I would try with different things that I had, and they didn't work. It was inconsistent. So I just got a text from Georgia that says, "Can you turn up your volume?" I have no idea how to turn up my volume.
I
I'm not
just did that.
How do you do that?
Up at the top of your screen, there should be little microphones. Oh, I'm on a laptop, so I don't know.
I don't have little microphones on my screen.
Oh, no, not on your screen. I'm sorry, on your keyboard.
Oh, John Fox says Jan's volume is fine for me, loud and clear. Thank you, John. I'll just keep talking then. So anyhow, I was talking about a pendulum, and I tried using a pendulum and they didn't work. And then I was at a retreat up at Mount Madonna in the gift store, and a pendulum literally fell off of a top shelf onto the floor in front of me. And of course, I bought it. And that pendulum has been really, really good. It has helped me find things. It only answers yes or no questions, but it's helped me a lot in knowing what to eat, in knowing what treatments to take. It's my access to my intuition. And it doesn't mean that everybody can use a pendulum. Some people find other methods.
Yeah, and I write to my guides. I write in a journal and write questions and then get answers. But that is certainly something where we've linked, is the intuition. In fact, we even taught workshops on intuition, and we approach that really differently. But that pendulum has been so reliable for you.
It has been.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another story that's a chapter in the book, I'm not going to read it, but I'll just briefly tell the story, was my first experience of really trusting intuition that happened when I was 13. And my parents were going on a trip. I was raised a Mennonite, which is also in the book, my Mennonite background. And my parents were going to a Mennonite Central Committee conference in Kansas. And I didn't want to go. I just felt like I shouldn't go. And it was the first time I had really fought against my father. I mean, he was really strong. You do what I say. But I refused to go on that trip. And so because I didn't go, my parents took two other passengers from our church that went to the Mennonite Central Committee conference. And I was staying with my Aunt Susan, my mother's younger sister, who lived just a few blocks from us, so I could walk to the same school. Anyhow, they were scheduled to come home on Friday night, and about 9 o'clock on that Friday night, I started crying, and I told my Aunt Susan, something has happened to my parents. And I was really upset. And she said, oh, they'll, this was before the days of cell phones and constant connection, so we didn't know. And she said, oh, they'll be fine. Anyhow, I didn't sleep well that night. And 6 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock on the door, and it was the minister from our church to tell me that my parents had been in a serious accident at 9 o'clock on Friday night, the same moment that I started crying and said something was wrong. And the two passengers that they had taken with them were both killed in that accident. So if I would have been on that trip, I would have been sitting in one of those seats, and I might have been killed too. So several intuitive things happened. I mean, intuition that I knew when the accident happened, but also intuitively that I knew I shouldn't go on that trip.
And we're willing to even stand up to your father.
Mhm.
That's remarkable.
So I have to say, my father treated me differently after that. He because he was so happy that I hadn't gone on that trip.
Right.
He was actually glad that I had disobeyed him and refused.
That's great. So did you want to share something else from your book with us?
So I'm looking at the time. We have a few more minutes. I mentioned there's a chapter in the book on being a Mennonite. There's another chapter called Spiritual Evolution. It was not easy to get out of what I would call the womb of the Mennonite world. It was very safe in there. But I write a lot about how I managed, about how I gradually changed. I'm trying to see how much of this to read because we might be running out of time. I also write about the Center for Health Awareness, which is another nonprofit that I was part of from 1978 to 1985. And that was a really important part of my spiritual evolution. And now reading from that chapter in the middle, once we created the Center for Health Awareness, I started doing work that I loved, designing and teaching workshops on mind-body health for nurses. My 7 years at the Center for Health Awareness, living in the house I bought, raising Brian from ages 3 to 10, were some of the most stress-free, happy times of my life. I went to a body worker during that time who specialized in releasing trauma and negative emotions from the body. She told me after one session that there was nothing in my body for her to work on. When the center fell apart, again in another chapter, it caused a crisis of my faith, and I lost the peace of my spiritual connection for a few years. It was during the spiritual desert that Brian went to live with his dad. I moved in with Michael, who was my second husband, and we started our furniture store business. Instead of getting spiritually fed on Sundays, I worked in the furniture store. Instead of reading spiritual texts and meditating, I worked 12 hours a day and fell into bed exhausted. Instead of spending time with friends and benefiting from social connections, I worked 7 days a week. The diagnosis of cancer woke me up. It brought me back to my center and to the importance of my spiritual connection. This is one of the gifts cancer gave me. I feel that my cancer diagnosis was an answer to my prayer, Lord, make me an instrument. I needed that wake-up call to get back on my true path and experience a meaningful purpose in life. Spirituality and my connection to the divine has been a driving force in enabling me to thrive with cancer for over 30 years. I believe in the omniscience and omnipresence of God, meaning that God is everywhere and everything. He, she isn't up in the sky judging us, but is the energy that connects us and all of nature. A way of explaining this that resonates with me is that I have a finite self and an infinite self. My finite self is the individual called Jan, who functions in daily life. My infinite self is the kingdom or energy of God that is within me. It is my spiritual self. When the finite and the infinite selves are connected, this is my superpower. The infinite has all knowingness, is not afraid, and is at peace. The infinite me isn't anxious waiting for test results. The infinite me doesn't panic when cancer markers go up. The trick is not to let finite events eclipse the infinite. I'm not saying this is easy to do. The world around us addresses only the finite self and reminds us constantly of all the bad things that can happen and how much we need to be afraid. I have to consciously make an effort to stay in the peace of the infinite self. There are many tools that can help me: deep breathing, meditation, prayer, nature, laughter, music, quiet time, meaning and purpose in life. I believe the verse in the Bible, Romans 8:28, that says all things work together for good to those that love God. In practical terms, that means that anything that washes up on my beach, even cancer, is for my good. Things don't happen to me, they happen for me. I may not immediately see the goodness in an event or a diagnosis, but I know my finite viewpoint is limited. I trust that the goodness is there and I look for it. My spiritual life is an essential part of what has allowed me to live with cancer for over 30 years. Prayer, meditation, and daily reading of spiritual texts, along with a connection to a spiritual community, are all crucial components of keeping my spirit enlivened, my attitude optimistic, and my body healthy.
Wow. You are, I mean, I know this stuff and still you inspire me every time I hear it. And you're the only person that I've ever heard say cancer is a gift that didn't piss me off when they said it. Because I know that you don't mean it in that dorky way, like, oh boy, cancer. You know, it has a much deeper meaning for you. There's a lot of that surface stuff. And that's one of the many things that I love about you is that you say stuff that could be that surfacey stuff, but with all this depth underneath it.
Thank you. My reaction is always on the surface is always, oh shit, when something bad happens. I mean, I don't go immediately to, oh, thank you for this gift. So I'm in the middle of that again right now. And I noticed that it's 10:45 and we're supposed to be going on to questions. But I would like to read just a little bit of the very last chapter in the epilogue that's entitled What I'm Doing Now.
Okay, great.
And there's a little quote at the beginning of this chapter from Tagore. I can't pronounce his first name, but his last name is Tagore. And he says, death is not extinguishing the light. It is only putting out the lamp because the dawn has come. So for 33 years, every time I found out my cancer has progressed, my first reaction has been fear, quickly followed by research to find the next strategy to hold back the cancer. This chapter was written about a year ago. It says, now for the first time, my latest PET scan shows that cancer is in my liver in addition to growing in my lungs. This time feels different. I'm 80 years old now and questioning the strength of my will to live. These last few years have been tough, and there isn't a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. There's a deep division in our country. Democracy itself is in danger. Climate change is real, and natural disasters are constant, as are mass shootings and wars. And then there's COVID and the fear of COVID that doesn't seem to be going away. Is it worth the effort to continue living in this world? What if my time is finished? A therapist suggested I might want to consider the wisdom of my body and seriously ask that question. Maybe my body knows it's time for me to move on. Of course, I know I'm not in charge. My will to live, no matter how strong, isn't going to keep me alive. I've known women with young children whose will to live was over the top and they died. I've also known at least one woman who wanted to die and was angry every morning when she woke up and was still here. She eventually died, but it took a long time. She was not in charge. So I won't read the part that convinced me to go on to take a pharmaceutical, but I have been taking Ibrance since September of last year, which was not an easy decision, but I've been doing it. And often a drug works for a while and then stops for reasons we don't understand. One of our past conference speakers, Jeremy Geffen, MD, said, the essence of healing is focused intention wrapped in the arms of surrender. I'm focusing my attention on healing, and I want to be at peace with either outcome, living or dying, knowing that dying is guaranteed at some point. Dying is not a failure. It doesn't mean I didn't try hard enough or wasn't positive enough. It just means I'm going on to the next adventure. I've been told that we didn't want to be born. We were very comfortable in the warm womb, and any other life was an unknown. We didn't have a choice in that transition either, and it turned out okay. I'm trusting this next one will also. So I am at a place right now where I'm taking Ibrance and my cancer marker numbers went down for a while and now they're going back up. So I'm in that exact spot of, oh shit, can I do something else? What else is there? And maybe it's time to go. So this explains exactly where I am right now.
Wow. That's big. And I have my own personal views on that. So I would really like you to stick around. And the grace that you have in the face of all the alternatives is completely inspirational to me.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Terry.
I know that, I mean, we're moving to questions on a somewhat heavy note, but I just want to assure people that this book is loaded with all kinds of upbeat topics. You alluded to being a Mennonite. You also have brushes with Scientology and polyamory that are in the book. So there's something for everyone. And you have lived and are living a remarkable life. And I, for one, vote for you sticking around. But, you know, for what that's
Actually,
worth.
that's my vote too.
Yay.
I am focused on that. So let's invite Sandra Marinella to join us. I don't know if there have been things in the Q&A.
It appears so.
Yes.
I would guess if we took a poll among those in attendance, there would be an overwhelming groundswell of support for you sticking around. I'm just saying.
Thank you. So, Sandra, thank you so much for joining us and for monitoring the Q&A. And oh my God, I just got a chat from Judith, who was my college roommate. I didn't know Judith was here, but she says she votes for my sticking around too. So Sandra, do we have any questions or comments or something
We
you want to
very
say?
definitely have some questions.
Okay.
And let me say that, yes, I'm completely with Terry, that I find Adrian to be one of the most beautiful human beings ever.
Yeah.
We're all blessed to have her as part of our lives, inspiring us, showing us the way. And it has been such a joy and a blessing and a gift to work with her. And this book, I feel she's highlighted some of the pivotal things in it, but there's so much more. It's just really a fine journey to read this book. So let me turn, I call Jan Yoda. I've always called her Yoda and she likes it. But I'm really pleased to see that so many of you just call her superhero, super lady, Wonder Woman. So Jan, here's a few questions for you. One from the question Q&A we have, is your one chemo treatment the only mainstream medical treatment you had over the years? Did you maintain an ongoing relationship with medical oncologists?
Yes, I have always maintained a relationship with a medical oncologist. And when a treatment, with that first chemo, when I asked the doctor how much it would help me, he said it would increase my chances of survival by 5%. So to me, that wasn't worth it. When I had ocular melanoma, the treatment then of proton beam radiation increased my chances of survival by 97%. So that was a no-brainer. I did totally the medical treatment. I did proton beam radiation. I have also over the years taken some tamoxifen and other estrogen, because I have estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. I have taken things that lowered the estrogen. And I've always depended on my medical doctor for the testing, because as I would do alternative treatments, I wanted to know if they helped. So and over the years, I have to say, I have fired 7 oncologists that were not helpful, but then I would find one that was. The one I'm with right now, I've been with for 7 years.
Beautiful.
And she's willing to monitor what I'm doing and support whatever I do.
Beautiful answer, Jan. And thank you for the question, Uriel. I think one of the things Jan has modeled repeatedly for us is how important it is to take your individual journey and to find the best steps for you. And wise advice. Okay, here's another one for you, Jan. You stated, and several people like this, learning how I feel is an inside job. Beautiful sentence. Can you talk a little bit more about that for those of us who want to get more in touch with the inside job?
That goes back to my what I read on spiritual evolution, the finite self and the infinite self. And for the people that are Christian, it says in the Bible that the Spirit of God is within you. And I feel like I am part of the omniscience of God, and that is within me. That within me is the energy of the universe that I can tap into. It's like I can choose where I focus my camera. And if I focus my camera on the wars and on the fear and all the things, I don't listen to the news anymore because I find it makes me feel anxious. So it's my choice what I focus my camera on. And I need to read spiritual texts. I read the Daily Word every day. I read Mark Nepo's Book of Awakening every day. I need some kind of input to help me stay on that path. It's not something I can do all by myself. But I think for all of us, it's a matter of choice what we focus our camera on, and whether we focus it on something that makes us afraid or something that makes us feel at peace.
Beautiful. Well said, Jan. Really well said. Now let's jump to a different topic. It says, if you had not published your book, would the writing of your story still have been worthwhile? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. 3 years ago, I probably couldn't have answered many of these questions because I hadn't thought about it in that way. And writing it really helped me to see more clearly who I am and what's helpful to me. So yes, I would recommend, I mean, that's what this book is about, the story you need to tell. It's writing to heal from trauma, loss, or illness. It's not writing to publish. So writing is very helpful without publishing. And the only reason I'm publishing is because my prayer is to make me an instrument. And I'm hoping that my story will be helpful to other people. So and it's scary. It's really scary to be publishing it because some of my very personal inside things are going to be out there in the world to read. But if it's going to help other people, I'm willing to do it.
Oh, I love that response. Thank you. Wow. You have created, I think this is a good one. You have created conferences, programs, book clubs for people facing life-altering situations. Can you talk just a bit about how community has played a role in your own healing and longevity?
Yes, and again, there's a chapter in the book called Social Support. Social support is incredible. And when I was diagnosed with cancer in 1989, David Spiegel was doing research then on social support for women with metastatic cancer. He was doing groups and found that the people in the group lived twice as long. And I looked for a group then, and in 1989, it wasn't easy to find one because it was just starting, they were just starting to do it. But when I started Healing Journeys, and there would be audiences of 1,000 people, and I connected with so many people, the feeling of not being alone was so strong. I mean, that the Healing Journeys community became my support group, and I had individual connections. I mean, I would say that could be another gift of cancer, because most of the people in my life right now, I wouldn't know if I had never had cancer.
Oh.
So Sandra, you're part of my support group. Terry's part of my support group.
And I think we both feel extremely blessed. I mean, it's just so enriching. We often talk about how much the two of us talk about how we value teaching other patients together, because their lives just light up through your wisdom. So thank you for sharing it with us. A few things from the Q&A, and there are some beautiful messages to Jan coming in on the chat. And I want to encourage everyone who's out there, if you want to leave Jan a message, you can leave it in the chat. So do so today, because it'll make her happy that she got up early.
And Georgia is going to send me the chat afterwards, because I'm not able to read it right now.
Yes. Okay. Here's a couple more from the Q&A that I want to share with you. Hi, Jan, when will we receive your book? And I'd like you to sign mine since we are both in Sacramento, perhaps a book signing in Sacramento. What's up with your book now?
That's a great question. So my goal was to have an actual book in my hand today, but that didn't happen because there was some technical glitch. So we are asking people to do pre-orders up until August 1st. And the pre-order price is $16, and that can only be for people in the United States because we can't ship to other countries. I mean, it's too expensive to ship to other countries. It's like $40 to send it to another country. But in August, once we know how many to order because of the pre-orders, then we will order the quantity of books and send them out to everybody who's done a pre-order. And then Ingram Spark, who is publishing the book, has distribution centers in many different countries, and it will be available in any bookstore. So sometime in August, and we'll send an email to our people when that happens. They can go to any bookstore and order it. And the price in a bookstore will be $16.99 plus tax. So for people that have pre-ordered, don't expect it before August. I have been invited to do a book signing for a nonprofit in Davis in October for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I haven't decided yet if I'm doing a book signing in Sacramento, but I'm thinking about it. So again, we'll send everybody an email to let them know if and when that happens.
I vote for the book signings.
Me too.
You're great. You're great at talking about your experiences and sharing it. Jan, I think we're all just smitten with your journey and with how you've modeled for us to live. And I appreciate that. And I want to end with a quote here from the Q&A. Erica Rayner Horn wrote, Jan, I want to thank you and acknowledge your incredible contribution to the world of living with cancer as fully and joyfully as we can. My diagnosis was in 2002, and shortly after, I discovered Healing Journeys and started attending those wonderful programs in Seattle. Thank you. I think we all feel like such gratitude for all you've brought to us, Jan, every one of us. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Erica, for writing that. I know her. It's like I know so many of these people that I have met over the years, and I'm so grateful for your support and that you're here. I've gotten email and text messages from people congratulating me, and I'm feeling very grateful.
Tears of truth. I'm crying tears of truth. Jan taught me to do that. You know,
Truth tears. Sometimes when I speak something that I didn't really know before I spoke it, and when I speak it, I cry, and that's my truth tears. I'm speaking the truth. So Terry, anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Just everybody get the book and tell everybody you know to get the book. It really holds a lot of lessons for living, whether or not you've ever been touched by cancer. I know we've had a lot of emphasis on that, but Jan's wisdom and her ability to triumph over adversity and enjoy the ride is applicable to any challenge that you may be facing.
Thank you. And thank you, Sandra and Terry, and thank all of you for being with us today. I just wanted, I want to do a little plug for the next Healing Journeys event on Zoom. We're partnering with another nonprofit, Cancer Talks, to offer a 6-week book group with Sandra starting September 5th. And registration for that will be open sometime next week. So the same book that got me going writing, the same book group, Sandra, you and I are going to be doing it again in September. So
I'm blessed. We love you, Jan.
So thank you all. And again, thank you for those of you that made donations. That's our only source of income to pay the expenses of doing this. And thank you all very much for coming. And I think we'll sign off.
Thank you.
Thank you.